everybody, and welcome to the Managing Farm Risk webinar series. This is the third part in our six-part series focused on farm risk. Today, we're going to look at production risk, and we've already covered human resource risk and legal risk. We're excited that you can join us today. I'm going to go ahead and let the presenters introduce themselves, and then I'll tell you a little bit more. So first, Ed, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Ed Ferris. I'm an extension educator, county extension director in Huntington County.
Perfect. Kelly, do you want to introduce yourself? Or maybe Michael?
Yeah, Michael Langemeyer, professor of agriculture economics at Purdue University.
Okay, and Jenna?
Hi, I'm Jenna Neese. I'm the A&R educator in Putnam County and also serve as the adult education coordinator for the Putnam County Soil and Water Conservation District.
Perfect. Well, thank you to all of our presenters for joining us today to tell us about production risk. We did want to mention that this project is funded by the NCRME. We were able to receive a grant as a team, and all of the materials that you're seeing today are based upon the work supported under that grant. So this webinar series serves to give you a little taste of a course that we have. There's an online course titled 6 Pillars of Farm Risk Management. As you can probably guess, those 6 pillars are the 6 pillars that we also give you a sample in this webinar series. But that course is online. It's open enrollment. It rolls. We have it open right now through November of 2022. We're hoping to extend that. It's only $49, and if you go through the whole course, participants will earn a Purdue certificate. It helps you to mitigate, manage, transfer risk in your farm business, and try to identify risk areas that you have. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our great presenters today and take it away.
Okay, I'm going to give some high overview of production risk and then turn it back over to Ed and Jenna for a little more detail. First of all, I think it's important to identify your firm's or your farm's production risk. Of course, the biggest production risk for most cases is weather. And so that's one of the main reasons why we buy crop insurance, which Ed and Jenna will talk more about. Also, climate change. Some individuals have noticed that we have more frequent very heavy rains, and maybe rains are not as timely as they were historically. And so again, that's a very important production risk to think about. And then we have some of our traditional production risk in production agriculture, pests, diseases, genetics, machinery efficiency, unknown or uncertain quality of inputs. Let me talk a little bit more about machinery efficiency. What we're really talking about there, and this is very important in the Eastern Corn Belt where we get more rain than the folks in the Western Corn Belt get, is sometimes we have to buy larger machinery for similar acreage in the Eastern Corn Belt than they would in the Western Corn Belt because of the heavier rainfall. And so what we're really talking about with machinery efficiency is machinery size. How do we think about what size machinery we need for our farm? And that's related to production risk. Obviously, if you can't get your corn in timely, that could reduce the yield of the corn and create some more volatility in corn yields. And so that's what I'm talking about when I talk about machinery efficiency. This year, one of the risks that we've seen that's very important from a production standpoint is availability of inputs. Many producers have had difficulty getting their herbicide of choice. And so they had to go to plan B, plan C in terms of their herbicides. And so that can also represent a production risk. Choices in dealing with production risk, and again, Ed and Jenna will talk about this in more detail. We can control, or it should probably say mitigate rather than minimize. Our goal is not often to minimize risk. We have this risk-return trade-off we need to think about, and so we're mitigating or trying to reduce risk with maintaining our production level if possible. And so what are some ways that we can control or mitigate risk through management practices? How can we reduce production variability with some standard management practices? And then what are some ways we can transfer some or all of the risk of an activity to someone else? So let's start with controlling or mitigating a risk. Examples here would be tiling. That would be a classic example. As we get these more heavy rainfalls, tiling becomes more important to try to make sure that those soils are drained and we reduce the yield variability in the field. Also, irrigation. We've seen a lot of irrigation going into Indiana since 2007. Part of that was due to some strong cash flows from 2013, but also that's a way to reduce variability. And so irrigation is another good example. I already talked about one example, timeliness of operations. This is extremely important. Do we have the equipment to get the corn and soybeans planted in a timely fashion? Similar when we're talking about harvest. Do we have the combine capacity to timely harvest our corn and soybeans? And so size of machinery is a very important item. And then also preventive maintenance. How many breakdowns do we have in the field? And is there anything we can do to try to reduce these breakdowns? The final slide that I will talk about before turning it over, and this is just summarizing some things that are going to be talked about a little bit more in this webinar. Is there a way to transfer risk to someone else? And let's start with contracting. First of all, production contracts is just like the name implies. Here we're paid a fee to produce something like swine. A swine finishing operation would be an example of a production contract. And why would someone enter into a production contract? Well, there's many reasons. One reason is to stabilize income. You're paid a fixed fee per pig, or maybe there's some bonuses related to that, related to finishing those pigs. But obviously, you don't own the pigs, and so a lot of the risk is not there. If you were an independent producer, the risk would be substantially more. Also, it's a way to improve efficiency. Typically, you're using the latest available technology. If you enter into a production contract, there's also market security. You don't have to worry about market prices, and also access to capital. Many times, if you enter into a production livestock contract, you do have access to capital to borrow money for the facility that you need to put up. And so various reasons to enter production contracts. Marketing contracts, the same idea. Here we enter into these to stabilize price received. This can be talked about a lot more when we talk about marketing risk in a different webinar. But I wanted to talk a little bit about this in the context of production risk. Many times these marketing risk is integrated with production risk. And then something most of us are very familiar with: insurance, property and casualty insurance, health, life, and disability insurance, liability insurance. These are all important for our farm to have. And then crop insurance. Crop insurance can be used along with marketing plans to mitigate downside risk, and is very effective in trying to eliminate the downside risk associated with extreme weather. For example, in 2012, we had drought in Indiana. Crop insurance really came in and did a nice job of eliminating some downside risk, or really mitigating some downside risk. In 2009, another example, in 2019, we had a very wet June. Again, so the crop got a really late start. The yields were not as good, particularly in northern Indiana. And again, crop insurance was there to help mitigate some of the risk associated with those extreme weather events. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ed or Jenna.
Okay, we're going to switch now to talk about describing what is a contract when you're talking about transferring risk. And we mentioned there are different types of contracts, but the important to identify is that they can be written or an oral agreement between two or more parties involving some type of commitment to do or refrain to do something. And it can specify quality, price, quantities, services. There can be lots of different types of contracts. I think about 40 years ago, when my family raised produce, we worked with a local broker, and there was nothing ever in writing, but we would deliver all the melons and tomatoes that we produced through that broker. So this was an unwritten contract, but it was, we had so in a lot of cases in farming over the years, this is what how things have been done with certain types of ag commodities. That's changed a lot over the years. Where I mentioned 40 years ago, how we did things things are done a lot different now in the produce business per se. So today's world, there are a lot of things that need to be identified, and thinking about when these agreements between farmers and agribusiness, thinking about the conditions that are associated with producing and marketing products is important, and getting this established from the start is critical. So thinking about why would a grower want to get involved with something like this, and the stability of income, the improved efficiency, market security, and access to capital is, from their perspective, what they would look for by getting involved with an agribusiness. And for a retailer, they on their end, they would be able to control input supplies, improve responses to consumer demand, and expand and diversify operations. So thinking about what the trade-off is that there's some management independence and decision-making that is given up to have a more stable income and less variability. So if we go back to the example of my family and my father entering into a contract, he didn't know always what he was getting into when we delivered the produce. We didn't know the price at all times because that depended on the market. But some of these things now you can identify more specifically, with whether it's grain or whether it's what other commodity you're delivering to the person in business that you're working with. So the bottom line is that contracts help bring a more uniform product to the market. That's the important thing to remember about why you get involved and why it helps efficiencies on both sides of the coin. So moving ahead to thinking about reasons for carrying insurance, why would you want to do this? Because the insurance, obviously, people know that when an adverse event occurs, there needs to be some type of protection there, or it can, cause severe economic hardship if there isn't anything to back up. And so risk is at least partially transferred from a farm operator to an insurance company. And when this adverse event occurs, the amount of loss must be observable and measurable to receive a recovery payment. And so that's something to remember when you think about, what is a true reason for carrying insurance? And so those two key words, observable and measurable, if there is an event that occurs, to, help provide that economic backing. And so looking at importance of crop insurance, when you think about this type of, we mentioned there's all types of insurance that you will help, a farmer, but it does guarantee a level of production, provides the money to deliver on a commitment, and it just essentially removes the risk associated with forward pricing or selling products that are yet to be produced. And so in that regard, thinking about working with a lender with an operating loan, this may be a critical step in getting approval for the lender to say, this is a borrower that we feel that has the ability to show that they can make good on this loan. So that in more cases than not, what we're finding out is that the crop insurance is, and in today's world, especially with the way input prices are going up, there's the financial management side is very important for the risk associated with, lenders that are working with producers. So going ahead, then we think about, just why is insurance a tool for asset protection in general? And we think about the other types of reasons why you carry insurance. The medical expenses, people know, I'm sure you've heard, horror stories about how that can wreak economic havoc on a family. And then important to distinguish between life and disability protection, because, most people do think about life insurance, but not always disability. But the statistics show that farmers are more likely to be disabled than killed in accidents. So that's important to think about those differences between the protection you have with insurance there. And a liability policy does protect against lawsuits brought on by persons claiming negligence. In some cases, you distinguish your businesses by having limited liability companies, that type of thing, to help in that arena as well. Because if you do have different types of equipment, different types of services you're providing with your farming operations, it is often critical to separate those out. So going ahead, then we'll talk, and Jenna's going to transition. So Jenna, go ahead.
Thank you, Ed. So as a reminder, we're going over the 3 strategies that can be used to help deal with production risk. And again, those strategies were to mitigate risk through management practices, reduce production variability, and transfer some or all of the risk. So far, we've not talked about reducing production variability, and that's what we're going to do here. Production variability focuses on reconfiguring the operation while maintaining flexibility. So we can do this by diversification, flexibility, vertical integration, and applying new technology. And we'll talk about each one of those in a little bit more detail. So up first is diversification. And diversification can occur when you produce crop and livestock enterprises on the same farm, introduce a new crop into your enterprise mix, or take on another product line for your small farm or agribusiness. Other possibilities may include value-added goods, non-traditional crops such as pumpkins or tomatoes, or looking at a different marketing method such as a new farmer's market, roadside stand, or community-supported agriculture. Essentially, what you're doing is offsetting the low income from one enterprise by a high income from the other enterprise. By doing this, you're able to help reduce income variations from year to year. This can be done producing 2 or more enterprises together that leads to a reduction in unit labor or capital cost, or by producing 2 or more enterprises together that reduce the variability of net returns. So the hope is that if you pick 2 different things that you're going to produce, that if one is having a bad year and you're not getting as much income from it, the other one will be getting a good return, and they will help offset each other. Or if you're worried about variations throughout the year in terms of income throughout the different months, then maybe you'll have some products that come out in the early spring and some in the fall. And because you're able to spread when you're able to market those items, you can have a constant flow of income into your operation. However, there are some things to keep in mind about whether or not diversification will work. And so there are some key questions to actually ask yourself, and those are on our next slide. And you want to ask those before you jump headfirst into diversifying your operation. The first one is, how does net returns associated with diversifying compare to expanding what you're already doing? If those net returns are not going to increase or do not increase substantially, you would probably not want to pursue diversifying your small farm and agribusiness. If you look at expansion and that's going to be the bigger return, head in that direction. The second question is, how does the variability of net returns and downside risk with diversifying compare to an expansion of what you're already doing? If returns are limited and downside risk does not change or improve, then diversifying may not be the best option. Now, if net returns are better and the downside risk is better than just expanding what you're currently doing, then that's the preferred option. So it's really important that you ask yourself those questions and go through all the facts and gather all your information before you jump headfirst into diversifying your operation. Make sure that you have the labor to be able to handle the new product lines that you may be, or even the new markets that you're going to be visiting. If you don't have the resources there to help complete your task when you diversify, then it's probably something you shouldn't be jumping headfirst into. Now, there's another way that you can reduce production variability, and that's through flexibility. Flexibility focuses on whether or not you're able to utilize your resources and capital across your production line. For instance, if the equipment you already have allows you to produce item A, and some or all of the same equipment can be used to produce item B, then you could be flexible enough to reduce production variability. One of the ways I think about this is if you have trucking or transportation equipment. If you can use that to haul different types of items throughout the year, then you can make a profit from using the same equipment multiple ways. Or if you're a farm that puts up hay, maybe you already have the mowing machine and the rake, and you've got a big round baler. Well, if you purchase a square baler, you can use that mowing machine and the rake, and then produce both large bales and square bales that you can sell at the market. And so you would be able flexible enough to have multiple types of production. Now remember, your production capacity can be impacted by your labor availability and the demand for your product in your area. So in my case with my hay example, if you know that most of your market only wants square bales, probably producing those big bales of hay may not be the best option for you. Or if you know you don't have the labor to pick up all the small square bales, then you might want to stick to the large bales if that's more what your labor force is capable of doing. Another factor is the availability of equipment to transport products to the consumers. Ultimately, you want to be flexible in how you utilize your resources and capital to help you reduce your production variability, to help your small farm and agribusiness be successful. The next way that we can reduce production variability is through vertical integration. Vertical integration focuses on all the ways that output from one production stage is transferred to another. A good example of this is when a traditional row crop farm raises corn and soybeans and has the capacity to make their own livestock feed, to either sell to other livestock producers directly or to utilize their own livestock in their own livestock operation. Another example I think of is if you've got a corn and soybean operation and your cornfields have fence around them and you have livestock, go ahead and let them graze the crop residue. That would allow you to utilize that resource that's already on the ground, and you would have to be able to save some money by not buying feed as early because you're able to capture the resources there that you've just left after you've harvested the corn. In the example with the growing your own feed, you are integrating the crops that you're producing into another product, and you're cutting out the middle person because you're not buying feed. And so you're going to be selling or saving yourself some money. Now, the ability to do vertical integration depends on market opportunities, asset availability, and the skill and knowledge of your managers. An example of letting the animals graze the crop residue, well, do you have the fence around the field? If you don't, it's not as easy to do. But if you do have the fence, put up some gates, get the cows in the field, let them graze on that crop residue. The idea of vertical integration may run counter to the idea of specializing in one area. However, many farms are a blend of both integration and specialization. So you've just got to find the right mix for you. Now, the final way we will look at reducing production variability is through applying new technology. One example of new technology is precision agriculture, which allows our machines and equipment to be more efficient and offset some of the expenses or costs of doing business. A really good example of this is utilizing precision agriculture to apply fertilizer or to apply herbicide. if we know that we can manipulate it so that we're only applying what's needed in terms of fertilizer and specializing in getting extra in one area that's low in certain NPK, and then we've got another field or another area of the field that's good, and we can adjust what we're applying, we're able to make sure that we're not applying the same rate the whole field throughout, and we can get a better bang for our buck because we're not paying too much in areas that we don't need quite as much fertilizer. Or if we're able to make sure that we're only spraying certain parts of the field with that herbicide that really need it, and not just spraying the whole field because we've got GPS, that can help too. And it will help reduce those fertilizer and herbicide bills associated with just doing normal business by adapting to that new technology that is available to us. Now realize that there are continual advances in technology. Therefore, it's important that small business farms and agribusinesses strive to find out what is the latest technology in their field and adopt those practices when possible. However, it is up to the management team to decide if adoption of a new technology is always the best route for the small farm and agribusiness to take, as some of the new technology may have too much of an upfront cost for the business to endure when it's first made available. So you may have to wait. Plus, sometimes it's nice to let technology adjust and get fine-tuned before you really jump headfirst into adopting it, because there may be some kinks that need to be worked out with those new technologies as they come out. So we've kind of covered the different ways to reduce production variability on your small farm and agribusiness. If you do want some further reading, we have on here a little bit of a resource that might be able to help you. It's the Extension Risk Management Education and Risk Management Agency's Introduction to Risk Management article. It's got a lot of great details and facts that you can dig deeper into. Plus, we've got that course available that Renee told everyone about at the beginning of our program today. And so there is a slide that kind of shows the enrollment opportunity for our 6 pillars of farm risk management and the registration link.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. That was a great presentation. We've got some time for questions. Does anyone have questions for Jenna, Michael, or Ed? You can either put those in chat or shout them out. Okay, we'll give people just one more minute. Maybe you're thinking of a question or typing it in. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any questions at this time. You all must have done an amazing job covering everything and explaining everything perfectly. So we really appreciate it. And thank you all for whoever was able to join us. And if you're checking out the recording, that's great too. We look forward to seeing you all next week when we talk about social media risk. So have a great rest of your week, and we'll hopefully see you back. Thank you, everybody.